She thought it was just another move. But when she noticed the strange letters, her world began to unravel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments from where are you watching this video. The sun was setting over the small town of Willow Creek as Sarah and her teenage son Jake unpacked the last of their boxes. The house, a cozy two-story with a wraparound porch, was supposed to be a fresh start. Sarah had left her past behind, seeking a quieter life after years of city chaos. The town was picturesque, with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors who waved as they passed by. But as she sorted through the mail, a plain white envelope caught her eye. It had no return address, just her name scribbled in hasty handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "I've been waiting for you." The evening had begun like any other. They were sitting in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. The sound of unpacking boxes filled the air, accompanied by the occasional rustle of paper. It was a familiar scene, one that had played out countless times before. But then, without warning, she reached for the mail. The envelope felt heavier than the others, its surface smooth but somehow ominous. Her heart raced as she opened it, the words inside making her blood run cold. A seed of fear was planted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their new life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The room seemed to shrink as the weight of that moment settled over her. She recalled the countless moves they had made, the new beginnings, the quiet conversations, the sense of security that had once filled their home. Now that security felt fragile, like a glass vase teetering on the edge of a table. She thought about the routine they had built together, the predictable rhythm of their lives, and how this one moment had introduced a discordant note. Her mind wandered back to the early days of their relationship, when every glance, every touch, every word held a significance that now seemed lost. She remembered the way Jake used to look at her, with eyes full of adoration and promise, but now his eyes were clouded with a mixture of guilt and fear, a look she had never seen before. It was as if he had been carrying a secret, something heavy that he could no longer conceal. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. She wanted to ask him what was wrong, to demand an explanation for the change in his demeanor. But something held her back, a fear of what she might discover. She was torn between the desire to confront him and the dread of unsettling the delicate balance of their relationship. As the minutes ticked by, the silence between them grew more oppressive. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder of the uncertainty that now loomed over them. She tried to focus on her unpacking, to pretend that everything was fine, but her hands trembled as she placed each item in its new place. The letter on the table seemed to mock her, its presence a constant reminder of the unknown threat that now loomed over their new life. She glanced at Jake occasionally, trying to read his expression. His eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding hers, and his usual calm demeanor was replaced by a visible tension. His hands moved mechanically, as if he were going through the motions of unpacking without any real awareness. It was clear that his mind was elsewhere, consumed by whatever had been revealed in that letter. The evening wore on, and the gap between them seemed to widen. She felt isolated, alone in her thoughts, unable to bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened up. She wondered if she had the strength to confront him, to face whatever truth was lurking in the shadows of their relationship. Or would she choose to ignore it, to pretend that everything was still the same, hoping that the storm would pass on its own? As the night drew to a close, she realized that she couldn't avoid the truth forever. The strange letter had awakened a part of her that she had long suppressed, a part that demanded answers and clarity. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she also understood that she couldn't move forward without confronting the doubts that now haunted her. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not let the uncertainty consume her. She would seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And with that resolve, she steeled herself for what was to come, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that their relationship would never be the same again. "Did you see the new neighbor?" Jake asked casually. But when Sarah glanced out the window, she saw something unsettling. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, each one more confusing than the last. Sarah had tried to brush off the incident with the letter, convincing herself that she was overreacting. But the seed of fear had been planted, and it grew with each passing day. Jake began to act differently, his behavior subtle but noticeable. He would spend more time in his room, his eyes fixed on his phone, and his responses were vague, almost evasive. One evening, as they were preparing for bed, Jake mentioned a new neighbor who had been asking questions about them. Sarah's heart raced as she peered through the curtains, catching a glimpse of a man standing across the street, his eyes fixed on their house. As the days turned into weeks, she found herself paying attention to every little detail. The way Jake spoke about the neighbor, the way he avoided eye contact when she asked about his day, the way he seemed to light up when discussing certain topics. Each of these moments chipped away at her confidence, eroding the trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship. She felt like she was walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next crack would appear. She tried to focus on her own life, to distract herself from the growing unease. But every conversation, every glance, every silence seemed to carry a hidden meaning. She began to question everything, from Jake's late nights in his room to his sudden interest in social media. The line between reality and paranoia started to blur, and she found herself trapped in a cycle of fear and doubt. One night, as she lay awake beside Jake, she couldn't help but wonder if she was losing her mind. Was she reading too much into his actions, or was there really something to be concerned about? The uncertainty was suffocating, and she knew she couldn't keep living in this state of limbo. She needed answers, but the fear of what she might discover kept her silent. As the tension between them grew, she realized that their relationship was at a crossroads. The subtle shifts in Jake's behavior had awakened a part of her that she had long suppressed, a part that demanded clarity and truth. She knew that she couldn't keep ignoring the signs, no matter how painful the truth might be. And with that realization, she steeled herself for what was to come, ready to face whatever lay ahead, even if it meant confronting the very foundation of their relationship. The following days were marked by an unsettling silence that hung in the air like a thick fog. Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the window, her gaze often drifting to the house across the street. The man whom she had only seen in fleeting glimpses seemed to linger just out of reach, his presence a constant reminder of her growing anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching them, his eyes piercing through the walls of their home, dissecting their lives with an unsettling curiosity. Jake, on the other hand, appeared oblivious to her distress. He would often come home late, his demeanor relaxed, as if the world outside their home was perfectly normal. Sarah tried to engage him in conversation, to share her concerns, but each time she broached the subject, he would deflect her questions with a casual laugh or a change of topic. This only deepened her sense of isolation, as if she were trapped in a bubble of fear while he floated freely in a different reality. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Sarah mustered the courage to confront Jake. "Do you think it's strange that the neighbor keeps asking about us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "I don't know, maybe he's just being friendly," he replied, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his tone that made her heart race. "Friendly? It feels more like he's watching us," she pressed, her anxiety bubbling to the surface. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're overthinking it, Sarah. It's a small neighborhood. People are just curious." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The next day, she decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, hoping to gather more information about the man who had invaded her thoughts. As she strolled past the neighboring houses, she noticed the way the curtains fluttered slightly, as if someone was peeking out to catch a glimpse of her. The sensation sent a chill down her spine, and she quickened her pace, eager to return to the safety of her home. That night, she lay in bed, her mind racing with possibilities. What if Jake was right? What if she was just being paranoid? But deep down, she knew that her instincts were rarely wrong. The unease had settled into her bones, a constant reminder that something was amiss. She recalled a time in her past when she had ignored her gut feelings, only to regret it later. The memory of that experience fueled her determination to uncover the truth. The following week, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She began to document everything she noticed about the neighbor, the times he appeared outside, the way he seemed to linger near their property, in the conversations she overheard between him and Jake. Each detail felt like a piece of a puzzle, and she was determined to fit them together. One afternoon while Jake was at work, she mustered the courage to approach the neighbor. She walked across the street, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached his front yard, she noticed the way he stood, arms crossed, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "Hello there," he greeted her, his voice smooth and inviting. "I was wondering when you'd come over." "Hi," she replied, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Sarah, your neighbor." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Mark," he said, his eyes glinting with an intensity that made her uneasy. "I've been meaning to get to know you and Jake better. You two seem like a lovely couple." The compliment felt hollow, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was an underlying motive behind his words. "Yeah, we just moved in a few weeks ago," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "How long have you lived here?" "Long enough to know that this neighborhood has its secrets," he replied cryptically, his gaze unwavering. The way he spoke sent a shiver down her spine, and she felt the urge to retreat. "Right," she said, forcing a laugh. "Well, I should get back. Jake will be home soon." As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her, a weight that pressed down on her shoulders. The encounter only deepened her suspicions, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was more than just a curious neighbor. That night, she shared her experience with Jake, hoping he would see the danger she sensed. "He said something strange, Jake. He mentioned that the neighborhood has its secrets," she recounted, her voice trembling. Jake frowned, his expression shifting from indifference to concern. "Maybe he was just trying to be friendly, Sarah. You're reading too much into this." "But what if he's not? What if he's hiding something?" she pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. "Look, I get that you're worried, but we can't jump to conclusions. We just moved here. It takes time to adjust," Jake replied, his tone firm but gentle. Sarah felt a wave of frustration wash over her. "You don't understand. I can't shake this feeling that something is off. I need you to believe me." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair again, a gesture that had become all too familiar. "I believe you, Mom. I just think we should give it some time. Maybe he's just a quirky neighbor." But Sarah couldn't let it go. The more she thought about Mark, the more she felt like he was a shadow lurking just outside their lives, waiting for the right moment to pounce. She decided to take action. The next day, she would visit the local library and dig into the history of the neighborhood, hoping to uncover any information about Mark that might explain his unsettling behavior. The following morning, she set out early, determined to find answers. The library was a quaint building with tall windows and shelves filled with dusty books. As she walked through the aisles, she felt a sense of calm wash over her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing anxiety that had become her constant companion. She approached the librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, and asked if there were any records or articles about the neighborhood. "Of course, dear," the librarian replied, leading her to a section filled with local history. As Sarah sifted through the materials, she stumbled upon an old newspaper article that caught her eye. It detailed a series of strange occurrences in the neighborhood: missing pets, odd sightings, and complaints about a man who had been seen lurking around homes. The article mentioned a previous resident who had moved away after feeling threatened by the same man, a name that sent chills down her spine. Mark. Her heart raced as she read the details. The man had a history of unsettling behavior, and the article hinted at a pattern of obsession that had driven families away. Sarah felt a mix of fear and determination. She had to protect Jake, and now she had the evidence to back up her instincts. They were having a quiet evening, until she found the package on the porch. One night as Sarah was preparing for bed, she heard a knock at the door. She hesitated, then cautiously made her way to the entrance. On the porch was a small, unmarked package. Inside was a photograph of her and Jake, taken just that morning at the local park. A note attached read, "I'm always with you." Her blood ran cold as she realized the truth. Someone had been watching them, following them, and now knew their every move. The evening had begun like any other. They were sitting in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. The sound of unpacking boxes filled the air, accompanied by the occasional rustle of paper. It was a familiar scene, one that had played out countless times before. But then, without warning, she reached for the mail. The envelope felt heavier than the others, its surface smooth but somehow ominous. Her heart raced as she opened it, the words inside making her blood run cold. A seed of fear was planted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their new life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The room seemed to shrink as the weight of that moment settled over her. She recalled the countless moves they had made, the new beginnings, the quiet conversations, the sense of security that had once filled their home. Now that security felt fragile, like a glass vase teetering on the edge of a table. She thought about the routine they had built together, the predictable rhythm of their lives, and how this one moment had introduced a discordant note. Her mind wandered back to the early days of their relationship, when every glance, every touch, every word held a significance that now seemed lost. She remembered the way Jake used to look at her, with eyes full of adoration and promise. But now his eyes were clouded with a mixture of guilt and fear, a look she had never seen before. It was as if he had been carrying a secret, something heavy that he could no longer conceal. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. She wanted to ask him what was wrong, to demand an explanation for the change in his demeanor. But something held her back, a fear of what she might discover. She was torn between the desire to confront him and the dread of unsettling the delicate balance of their relationship. As the minutes ticked by, the silence between them grew more oppressive. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder of the uncertainty that now loomed over them. She tried to focus on her unpacking, to pretend that everything was fine, but her hands trembled as she placed each item in its new place. The letter on the table seemed to mock her, its presence a constant reminder of the unknown threat that now loomed over their new life. She glanced at Jake occasionally, trying to read his expression. His eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding hers, and his usual calm demeanor was replaced by a visible tension. His hands moved mechanically, as if he were going through the motions of unpacking without any real awareness. It was clear that his mind was elsewhere, consumed by whatever had been revealed in that letter. The evening wore on, and the gap between them seemed to widen. She felt isolated, alone in her thoughts, unable to bridge the chasm that had suddenly opened up. She wondered if she had the strength to confront him, to face whatever truth was lurking in the shadows of their relationship. Or would she choose to ignore it, to pretend that everything was still the same, hoping that the storm would pass on its own? As the night drew to a close, she realized that she couldn't avoid the truth forever. The strange letter had awakened a part of her that she had long suppressed, a part that demanded answers and clarity. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she also understood that she couldn't move forward without confronting the doubts that now haunted her. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not let the uncertainty consume her. She would seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And with that resolve, she steeled herself for what was to come, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that their relationship would never be the same again. She could have stayed silent, but then she realized her son was in danger. The days that followed were a blur of fear and determination. Sarah had tried to convince herself that the strange occurrences were just her imagination, but the photograph and the note had shattered any illusion of safety. She knew she had to act, to protect Jake from the unseen threat that loomed over their lives. But every step she took felt like a battle, as if she were fighting an invisible enemy who knew her every move. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced out the window, her heart racing as she saw Mark standing across the street, his eyes fixed on their house. She quickly pulled the curtain shut, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked up from his phone, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong, Mom?" "It's Mark," she replied, her voice steady but laced with fear. "He's been watching us. I found a photograph of us in the mail, and there was a note. He's been following us." Jake's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "What? That's not possible. He's just a neighbor." "No, Jake, it's not just that. I did some research. There are articles about him, about how he's been obsessed with other families before. He's dangerous, and we need to do something. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. What can we do? We can't just accuse him without proof. We need to be careful, Sarah pressed on, her voice rising. We can't let him know we're on to him. No more talking to him. No more being friendly. We have to keep our distance. Jake nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by a growing sense of unease. Okay, I'll be careful. But what if he finds out we know? We have to be prepared, Sarah replied, her mind racing with possibilities. We need to document everything, every time he shows up, every strange occurrence. We need proof to take to the police. As the days went by, Sarah became increasingly vigilant. She kept a journal, noting every instance of Mark's presence, every unsettling encounter. She installed security cameras around the house, determined to capture any evidence that might incriminate him. But despite her efforts, the sense of danger only grew. She felt like they were living in a nightmare, with no escape from the shadow that loomed over them. One night, as they were preparing for bed, Sarah heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat as she glanced at the clock. Jake was already asleep. She hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to stay away from the door. But curiosity got the better of her, and she approached cautiously. Peering through the peephole, she saw Mark standing there, a friendly smile plastered on his face. "Hey, Sarah!" "Just wanted to drop by and say hello," he called out, his voice cheerful but with an edge that made her skin crawl. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "I'm sorry, Mark, but now isn't a good time," she replied, her voice firm but polite. Mark's smile faltered for a moment, and Sarah saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. "Oh, come on, Sarah. I just wanted to bring you some cookies. I baked them myself." "No, thank you," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "We're trying to keep to ourselves right now." Mark's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Suit yourself," he said, turning and walking back to his house. Sarah closed the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she had just made an enemy, and the thought sent a chill down her spine. But she also knew that she had to protect Jake, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between them grew. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, to invade their lives in a way that would leave them shattered. She tried to keep her fears hidden, to maintain a sense of normalcy for Jake, but the weight of her anxiety was crushing her. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jake looked at her with a concerned expression. "Mom, you've been acting really strange lately. Is everything okay?" Sarah hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal, but she knew that she couldn't keep her fears bottled up forever. "I'm just worried about us, Jake. I want to make sure we're safe." Jake nodded, his expression softening. "We are safe, Mom. We just need to be careful, okay?" Sarah smiled weakly, feeling a surge of love for her son. "Okay, baby. We'll get through this together." But as they finished their meal and settled into their routine, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Mark was still out there, watching and waiting, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before he made his move. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, the power went out, plunging them into darkness. The evening had started like any other, but the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah and Jake were sitting in the living room, the flickering light of the television casting shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and making the house creak. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, a feeling that had become all too familiar. She glanced at the clock. 8 p.m. It was time for Jake to start his homework, but the thought of him being alone in his room made her uneasy. "Jake, why don't you do your homework in here tonight?" she suggested, trying to keep her voice light. "Sure, Mom," he replied, his eyes glued to the screen. "Just let me finish this level." As she watched him play, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of Mark. She had seen him lurking around the neighborhood more frequently, his presence a constant reminder of the danger that loomed over them. She had tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid, but the feeling of dread was inescapable. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, the glow of the screen providing a small sense of comfort. "Jake, are you okay?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, but she could hear the uncertainty in his tone. "Let me grab some candles," she said, trying to keep her composure. As she moved through the darkened house, she felt a sense of vulnerability wash over her. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of fear through her. When she returned to the living room, she lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting a warm glow that felt both comforting and eerie. "Here we go," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "A little ambiance for our study session." Jake chuckled nervously, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thanks, Mom." As they settled in, the wind outside picked up, howling like a wild animal. Sarah's heart raced as she glanced out the window, half expecting to see Mark standing there, watching them. She shook her head, trying to dispel the thought. "It's just the wind," she whispered to herself. But as the minutes passed, the unease only grew. The darkness felt oppressive, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced at Jake, who was now focused on his homework, but she could see the worry etched on his face. "Jake, can you check the front door?" "Make sure it's locked," she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "Okay," he replied, getting up and moving toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Sarah's heart raced. She wanted to scream for him to stop, to come back, but she held her breath, forcing herself to remain calm. Jake turned the handle and pulled the door open slightly, peering into the darkness outside. "It's locked, Mom," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Good," she replied, but her heart still raced. The wind howled louder, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Let's just stay close to each other, okay?" They settled back down, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. But the atmosphere felt charged, as if something was about to happen. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to be vigilant, to stay alert. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, there was a loud bang outside, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Sarah's heart dropped as she jumped to her feet. "What was that?" she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Jake replied, his eyes wide with fear. "It sounded like it came from the backyard." "Stay here," Sarah commanded, her voice firm. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and moved cautiously toward the back door. The darkness felt alive, and every shadow seemed to shift and move. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay beyond. As she opened the door, the wind rushed in, chilling her to the bone. She shone the flashlight into the yard, scanning for any sign of movement. The beam of light illuminated the broken remains of a flower pot scattered across the ground. But there was no sign of Mark, no indication of what had caused the noise. "Mom, be careful!" Jake called from inside, his voice trembling. "I'm fine," she replied, though her heart raced with fear. She stepped outside, the cold night air biting at her skin. The flashlight's beam danced across the yard, illuminating the scattered remains of the flower pot. She knelt down to examine the pieces, her mind racing with possibilities. Had it been an accident, or was it another sign of Mark's escalating behavior? As she stood up, she noticed something else, a small piece of paper caught in the bushes. She walked over and pulled it out, her hands trembling as she realized it was another note. "I'm always watching," it read. The words sent a chill down her spine, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She quickly returned inside, locking the door behind her. Jake looked up from his homework, concern etched on his face. "What was it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was just a broken flower pot," she lied, trying to keep her composure. "Probably just the wind." But Jake wasn't fooled. He could see the fear in her eyes, and he knew that something was wrong. "Mom, we need to call the police," he said, his voice firm. "This can't keep happening." Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to do. She had tried to protect Jake, to keep him safe, but now she realized that she couldn't do it alone. They needed help, and they needed it now. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "We'll call them tomorrow." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of Mark and the danger he posed. She knew that they couldn't keep living in fear, and she was determined to take action. The next morning, she would go to the police station, armed with the notes and the photograph, and demand that they take her seriously. As the first light of dawn crept into the sky, Sarah felt a sense of resolve wash over her. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she couldn't give up. She had to protect Jake, no matter what it took. And with that determination, she steeled herself for the fight ahead, ready to face whatever lay in store. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Feel free to share this video with others and check out more stories on our channel.